What if I told you that you've already died? Not once, not twice, but, many times, and yet here you are, watching this, alive, not by chance, but because your story refuses to end. There's a theory buried in the shadows of quantum mechanics that says every time your life could have ended, the universe split. One version of you died, but another survived. And that survivor is always you. It sounds impossible until you remember that time, that moment you still think about, when the crash almost happened, when the diagnosis reversed, when you took a wrong turn and something told you to stop. You didn't. And then nothing, except that you're still here. A man once said he stayed home one morning because something felt wrong. Nothing specific, just a quiet pressure in his chest. That same morning, his usual train derailed. The news played all day, but the only thing he remembered was the silence, the kind that doesn't save you, the kind that just waits. We brush these moments off, call them luck, say, that was close. But close to what? Carl Jung had a different name for them. Synchronicity. When your inner world and the outer one collide. Not through cause, but through meaning. Like two notes harmonizing in a song you didn't know was playing. You felt it. The phone rings just as you think of someone. A dream unfolds in your day like it was waiting for you. A line in a book cracks something open in your chest. And maybe you've ignored it. Maybe you've told yourself it's nothing. But if it were nothing, would it still feel like everything? Jung believed these were messages from the self. Not the ego, not the mask, but the deepest, truest part of you. The part that isn't bound by time. The part that lives before your story began and continues after it ends. But here's the danger. The more we deny these moments, the quieter they become. And when we stop noticing the echoes, we forget how to listen. And maybe that's the real death, not the body, but the silence that comes when we no longer recognize the pattern. Because the universe doesn't always speak in language. Sometimes it speaks in timing, in symbols, in stillness. And when it does, it doesn't care if you believe in it. It only asks one thing: will you listen? So before we go further, stop. Close your eyes, even for a second. Think about the moment you were almost lost. Then think about the moment you found something instead, something you didn't plan, something that felt like it had been waiting for you. That's where this begins, not with certainty, but with remembering. Because the truth isn't loud, it's not obvious, it's not always comfortable, but it whispers. And if you've made it this far, it's because something in you still hears it. In 1898, a novelist named Morgan Robertson published a book about a ship called the Titan. It was the largest vessel ever built, called unsinkable. It hit an iceberg. It sank in the North Atlantic. Hundreds died because there weren't enough lifeboats. It happened in April. 14 years later, the Titanic set sail and met the same fate. Same size, same month, same ocean, same tragic flaw. Was it prophecy, coincidence, dumb luck? Carl Jung would say neither. He'd call it synchronicity, a deep alignment between inner knowledge and outer reality, not cause and effect, but pattern and resonance. This wasn't a prediction, it was a reflection, as if the future was already rippling through the present, as if some part of Robertson, some unconscious part, had already touched what was to come. That's what synchronicity does. It bridges things that should be unconnected. A dream and a moment, a thought and an event, a symbol and a tragedy, not because you're special, but because you're connected. Jung saw it everywhere, not just in myths and books and disasters, but in his patients, in everyday lives. He once treated a woman trapped in rigid rationalism, cold logic, no belief in anything beyond the material. Then one day she shared a dream, a golden scarab. As she spoke, a beetle tapped against the window behind Jung, a rare beetle, scarab-like, native to Egypt, not Switzerland. He caught it, handed it to her. Her worldview shattered. It was the only thing that could reach her, not a fact, not a formula, but a moment that made the world feel alive. And maybe the reason we doubt these moments is because they see us too clearly. Because synchronicity doesn't just reveal the world, it reveals us. It tells the truth we've been trying to outrun, that life has always been listening. And sometimes it speaks in a way that makes denial impossible. Skeptics will tell you it's just pattern seeking, that you notice the hits and forget the misses, that it's all brain chemistry, narrative bias, psychological noise, and sometimes they're right. But that doesn't make the pattern less real. Because if every human brain is built to find meaning, maybe meaning isn't a glitch, maybe it's a feature, maybe your ability to sense significance is exactly what connects you to something larger than you, something older than thought, deeper than emotion. The web, the net, the thread. In the East, they call it Indra's net, a cosmic web where each intersection holds a jewel. And in each jewel, the reflection of every other. You are one of those jewels. Every dream you have, every heartbreak, every choice you didn't make, they all ripple out and they all ripple back. And maybe that's why some mornings you feel watched, not by a stranger, but by the day itself. Like the moment is waiting to see if you'll remember. You felt it when you met someone and knew them before they spoke. When a sentence in a book felt like it was written with your blood. When a moment arrived with such precision it made you believe, if only for a second, that you were being watched, not by a god, not by fate, but by your own life, staring back at you through the mirror of coincidence. And what if those moments are more than just strange? What if they're invitations to wake up, to pay attention, to remember? Because beneath every random event is a design, and beneath that design is you. Let's break the rhythm for a second. You're not watching this by accident. You didn't make it this far because you're curious. You made it this far because something in you is starving, not for content, but for permission to feel what you've always felt. To say this world doesn't make sense unless I believe it's more than what I can see. Now breathe, because we're about to go deeper. You remember the time you should have died. Maybe no one knows it. Maybe nothing even happened. But you felt it, a hair's width from disaster. A decision you almost made, a corner you almost turned. And then nothing, except that you're still here. There's a theory buried deep in the fabric of quantum mechanics, one you won't hear in schools, but that some physicists whisper like myth. It says you may never experience your own death, that your consciousness, whatever it truly is can only continue down the branch where you survive. Every time your life hangs in the balance, the universe splits. In one world, you're gone. In another, you keep living. And the one who keeps living is always you. They call it quantum immortality. To you, it feels like luck, chance, a miracle. But to the theory, it's inevitable. You're Schrodinger's cat, both alive and dead, until the moment is observed. But the cat that sees the world? Always the one that lives. Some call it nonsense, unprovable, pseudoscience, and maybe it is. But let's ask a better question. Doesn't it feel familiar? The car crash that didn't happen. The surgery that somehow went right. The night you walked home past the danger just before it arrived. Carl Jung didn't know quantum physics, but he knew about survival. He once had a heart attack and left his body. He described it later as unspeakably glorious, as if he saw the other side. Not in metaphor, in experience. He didn't want to return. But something pulled him back, something unfinished. That's what no one tells you. Quantum immortality isn't about living forever. It's about not being done. It's about purpose being heavier than probability. It's about the self, the true self, not the mask, refusing to vanish until it becomes what it came here to become. And that might be the most important thing you'll ever hear. Because maybe the part of you that survives is the part that remembers why you're here, not to win, not to escape death, but to fulfill something sacred. You're not just surviving by accident, you're surviving because your story isn't over. And the more you align with that truth, the more you follow the thread, the feeling, the pull, the more this world begins to speak back. Not in science, not in signs, but in silence, the kind that doesn't ask you to believe, only to listen, because the self doesn't need your faith. It only needs your permission to keep unfolding, to keep remembering, to keep returning again and again until what was broken becomes whole. And maybe that's what immortality is, not the absence of death, but the presence of purpose so strong that death can't end it. There are things you've never done that feel like memories, places you've never been that still feel like home, people you've never met who feel like old friends from a lifetime you can't recall. You can't explain it, but you feel it deeply. It's not nostalgia, it's something older than memory, something like recognition. Carl Jung believed we're not just shaped by our past, we're shaped by a deeper past. One that doesn't belong only to us. He called it the collective unconscious. A vast reservoir of symbols, stories, instincts, and forgotten lives. It's why we all dream of falling, of flying, of losing things we never had. Why we recognize stories we've never heard. Why we grieve things we can't name. We're not starting from zero, we're continuing something. There's a story I never told anyone. A woman walks through an art gallery and stops in front of a painting. There's a boy with sea green eyes holding a broken violin. She begins to cry, not out of sadness, but something older, something cellular. Later she says, I think I used to know him. Not in this life, but somewhere. And maybe she did. Maybe memory isn't bound by chronology. Maybe grief travels across timelines. Maybe recognition is proof of repetition. Plato told a story like that too. A warrior named died on the battlefield and came back. He said that before birth, every soul chooses its next life. Every loss, every path, every lesson. Then drinks from the river of forgetfulness. But some drops don't take. And maybe that's why you dream of faces you've never seen. Why you feel the weight of a decision you haven't made. Why certain places feel like déjà vu before you arrive. You are the continuation, not just of biology, but of a story trying to remember itself. But maybe you don't buy it. Maybe you think that's all mythology, neat metaphors for chaotic lives, fairy tales to comfort those afraid of vanishing. If that's you, good. Because the truth doesn't need your agreement. It only needs your attention. And the longer you ignore those feelings, the ones that don't make sense, the ones that don't belong to this life, the more you lose something you can't replace. Not a memory, not a belief, but a thread, a connection to the part of you that knows what this life was always meant to become. And then there's the egg. A story about a man who dies and meets something divine. He learns that he isn't just himself. He is every person who ever lived. Every villain, every hero, every victim, every mother, every soldier, every lost child. And because the soul isn't singular, it's cyclical. It returns again and again through different names, different bodies, until it becomes whole. It's fictional. And it might be truer than fact. Because if you've ever met someone and felt your life shift before they even spoke, if you've ever wept at a sunset that felt like goodbye, if you've ever heard a piece of music that shattered something ancient inside you, then you already know. This life is not your first, and it may not be your last, but it is yours. And the thread you're following, the one that pulled you here, isn't random. It's remembrance, not of facts, not of dates, but of essence. And here's what no one says. You can lose it. You can drown it out with logic. You can ignore the ache. You can silence the dream until it disappears. Because the soul is not forceful. It waits, it knocks. And if you stop answering, it stops arriving. So when you feel something stir, when the hair on your neck rises, when the dream feels too real, when the past starts bleeding into the now, listen, not because it's comfortable, not because it makes sense, but because it might be the only part of you that remembers the truth. And the dream, the one you keep waking up from, the one you've almost forgotten, it's still unfolding, and you're still in it. There's a moment when everything falls quiet, not outside you, inside. A silence that feels like it's been waiting there for years. It doesn't arrive when you win. It arrives when you stop running, when you finally ask the question you've avoided your entire life. What if I'm not here to conquer the world? What if I'm here to remember who I was before the world told me who to be? Carl Jung wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid confronting their own soul. And he was right. Because the soul doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It doesn't come wearing the same face every day. Sometimes it speaks in grief, sometimes in joy, and sometimes in complete shattering stillness. But it always speaks. The problem is that most of us stopped listening, not because we're weak, but because we were told not to trust the silence. We were told to move faster, work harder, smile bigger, explain ourselves endlessly. And if we couldn't, we were falling behind. But what if falling behind is exactly how we catch up to ourselves? Here's the paradox. You become yourself not by adding more, but by shedding everything that isn't you. You find your strength not in resistance, but in surrender. You discover your path not by forcing it, but by following the thread. That thread doesn't look like a road. It doesn't follow a map. Sometimes it shows up as a breakdown. Sometimes it shows up as the one person who saw through your mask. Sometimes it doesn't show up at all until you stop trying to chase it. And when you finally do, you realize it was never leading you forward. It was always leading you inward. But what if you can't let go? What if the mask is all you've ever known? Then you live half awake, functional, polished, and deeply, unspeakably tired, because pretending is exhausting, and the soul always knows when you're not listening. We fear that if we drop the act, we'll disappear. But the truth is, you've already disappeared beneath the act. And becoming whole isn't about becoming new. It's about becoming real. This is the design most people miss. We treat transformation like a goal, like something to strive toward. But the self, the true self, doesn't emerge through effort. It emerges through remembering. You were always becoming what you already were. But only when the mask cracks. Only when the false self shatters. Only when the version of you that was built to survive finally breaks down and the version that was meant to live steps forward. Let's not pretend that's easy. It's not poetic when it's happening. It's terrifying. To let go of what you've outgrown before you know what comes next. To walk into the dark without a promise of light. But this is the place where every true life begins, not when you win, but when you no longer need to. And that's when the thread reveals itself, not as a miracle, not as a voice from above, but as a quiet, steady truth inside you. The thread is what pulled you through the night you thought you'd never survive. It's what helped you leave what you knew you had to leave. It's what brought you here, to this moment, asking questions no one around you seems to be asking. because some part of you knows you didn't come here to repeat. You came here to remember. You came here to wake up. And when you do, you begin to see that everything, every delay, every heartbreak, every closed door wasn't in your way. It was the way. The thread never left. You just stopped looking. But now you found it again. And if you keep following it, it will not lead you back to who you were. It will lead you to the one you were always becoming, the one who no longer needs to explain why they feel too much, or see too far, or dream too deep, the one who understands that the path was never linear. It was spiral, returning again and again, not to repeat but to reveal. And this is the turn where you stop running, where you stop waiting to be ready, and start becoming who you were never meant to forget. There's a silence that doesn't mean emptiness, it means presence, the kind that arrives when the story is finished, but the echo is still unfolding. Right now, that silence is here, not because this is the end, but because something has been remembered. You didn't come here to be convinced. You came here because some part of you already knew. You knew that the world isn't random. You knew that the dream you forgot was real. You knew, even if you buried it beneath logic and noise, that your life is not an accident. Carl Jung spent his life listening to what most people ignore, the symbols, the dreams, the wounds. He called them messages from the self. And he believed that the self wasn't just personal, it was universal, timeless, indestructible. But maybe that's why we stopped listening. Because if we really believed we were more than these bodies, more than these names, we'd have no excuse left not to change. And change is terrifying. So we disappear into distraction, into explanation, into the familiar lie that we're small, that we're powerless, that we're just one fragile flame flickering toward the dark. But you're not. You're not just a life. You're a light, still burning in every world where your story isn't finished. And maybe that's what quantum immortality is really pointing to. Not a loophole in physics, not a fantasy of living forever, but a truth that no death can take from you, that you are still unfolding, that you are still becoming, that the thread continues in places you can't see, across timelines, across versions of you that made different choices, lived different lives, died different deaths, but all carried one thing forward: consciousness. The light behind the name, the awareness that continues, not to escape death, but to fulfill something sacred. And maybe synchronicity was never about fate or destiny. Maybe it was always about guidance, a breadcrumb trail back to the path you never truly left. A secret reminder that the universe hasn't forgotten you, that you're still right on time. You weren't meant to disappear. You were meant to wake up, to open your eyes in the middle of your life and realize, I'm still here, I'm still breathing, and something ancient inside me still wants to live. So what now? What do you do with a message like this? You remember, you return, you respond, because someone else is still asleep, still waiting for a sign, still staring into the silence, wondering if what they felt was real. And maybe your story is the thing that wakes them. So leave it behind, in the comments, in your life, in the way you carry yourself from this moment on. Because you were never meant to disappear. You were meant to become the proof that we don't.